Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and finish 3.2. And what I want you to do for this question is I want you to find the intercepts and graph. I'm going to give you an equation about 4x plus 2y equals 6. Okay, so that's going to be our equation, and I want you to find the intercepts, and I want you to graph this. Now, how we find the intercepts is we have to make a table. And this is a specific table for the intercepts, and they have our zeros in them. Okay, so this is called our intercept table. Okay, so let's focus on what we're doing instead of chit-chatting. So let's try to focus on graphing our lines here. So let's find the intercepts and graph. We want to make a table. Now, when we talk about the intercepts, we've got to make a special table that has the zeros in it. And this is going to give us our x-intercept and our y-intercept. So we've got to find 2 points. We have to have 2 different points to graph this line. And they don't always have to be whole numbers either. They can be a fraction. Let's go ahead now and plug in x equals 0. So if I plug in x equals 0 into my equation here, then I've got 4 times 0 plus 2y equals 6. Well, 4 times 0 is 0, so that piece is gone. So 2y equals 6. We'll divide by our 2. And we now have y equals now 3. So that's going to go over here. We've got to do it twice. We've got to find the x-intercept and we've got to find the y-intercept. Next, we'll plug in y equals 0. So if I plug in y equals 0, then I get 4x plus 2 times 0 equals 6. Well, 2 times 0 is 0, so it's gone. So I get 4x equals 6. We'll divide by our 4. And we're going to reduce this down, and that reduces down to then be, it looks like when I reduce 6 over 4, that's going to reduce down to be 3 over 2. Okay, so that's 3 over 2 there. Now, what do our points look like? We want to find those intercepts. So we're going to start with, in this case, our y-intercept. You can do either one, but what's your y-intercept look like? Now, your y-intercept is going to be 0, comma, some number. So that's this one right here. So that's 0, comma, 3. That's your y-intercept, right? Y-intercept, because it has a y value, and 0 for the x value. Now, what about your x-intercept? Well, your x-intercept is going to be the second one, and it's 3/2, comma, 0. So there's your x-intercept, and there's your y-intercept. Now, we do need to graph these, and I picked this one on purpose to have that fraction, and it's an easy fraction to graph, just so you'll see how to graph that fraction. Now go ahead and graph our line here. We have to have 2 different points, and they are. They're both different. Our first one is our y-intercept, and that's at 0, comma, 3. So that's up 3 units. And that's going to be right about there. Now, what about 3/2? Well, 3/2, if you use your calculator, is 1.5, right? So we'll use the decimal equivalent. And so where would 3/2, comma 0 be at? Well, 3/2 is at 1.5. So that's in between 1 and 2. And that's going to be right about there. And that's going to be 3/2, comma 0. So if you have a fraction, how do you graph that? You just turn that fraction into a decimal. It'll be an easy one to graph. And you just say, well, 1.5 is in between 1 and 2. So I just put it there. Now we've got our two different points. We can now connect them together. And that graphs our line. So there's our line. We've got it graphed. And just so we remember which one is which, 0, 3, this is the y-intercept. Y, because it touches the y-axis. 3/2, 0, that's your x-intercept. Y, because it crosses the x-axis. So we found our intercepts. We used that table. We found our intercepts, and we graphed that line. Do a couple more of these. So next we're going to find the intercepts and graph of this one. How about y equals x minus 4? So I want you to find the intercepts and I want you to graph. Now, if we want to find the intercepts, we need to make an intercept table. And that's got our zeros in it. So we make sure we have our intercept table. This has got our zeros in it. So let's see our intercept table here. We're going to fill in our missing components. So we've got blanks here, and there. We're going to fill them in. And we're going to start with x equals 0. Well, if x equals 0, then that gives you y equals 0 minus 4. So y equals our negative 4. There's our negative 4 for a y value. So we plugged in 0 for x. It gave us a negative 4. What about the other one? We're going to plug in y equals 0. All right, and if I plug in y equals 0, then I get 0 equals x minus 4. I'm going to add 4. And rewriting, we have x equals 4. So this is our intercept table. So when it says find the intercepts and graph, you need to make a table like this. So you make your table, find your pieces. Now let's go ahead and label them. Our y-intercept. What's our y-intercept? Our y-intercept as an ordered pair is right here. And our y-intercept is 0, comma, negative 4. So there is your y-intercept. We also need our x-intercept. And what's our x-intercept going to be? 4, comma, 0. Do not put them together. A lot of times, I see students try to do this. Cannot do that. They are separate. Do not try to put them together. You have an x-intercept and you have a y-intercept. They are different ordered pairs. Do not try to put them together. Too many times I see students try to do this. They have to be written out separately. Now we want to graph this line, so the hard part's done. How do we graph this line? It's very easy to do. We plot our intercepts, so we've got 0, negative 4 for our y-intercept. So that's right there. Our x-intercept is at 4. So that's at 4, 0, which is right here. We now can connect them together. And we've got our line. So pretty simple to do these. They're not difficult. Just watch your signs when you plug the values in. We do need to look at a couple of special cases before we say we're finished with this section. And we're going to look now at one that gives you 00 for the intercepts and how we would handle that one. So the next one's going to have 00. It's going to go through the origin for your intercepts. So let's go ahead now and try to find the intercepts and graph here. How about we have y equals minus 3x. So we want to first try to find our intercept table. Just like we've done before. But this one's going to be a little bit different. Because if I plug in x equals 0, then I get y equals negative 3 times 0, which gives me y equals 0. If I plug in y equals 0, then I get 0 equals minus 3x. And again, what do I get for my x? I get x equals 0, right? Okay, now, to graph a line, we need a minimum of 2 different points. Right now, we only have 1, because both the x and the y-intercept are 0, 0. So in this case, the x-intercept is 0, 0, and the y-intercept is also 0, 0. We need and must have 2 different points. If we don't have 2 different points, then we need to find another one. So we need 2 different points here. We only have 1. So how do we handle that when we only have 1? So we need 2 different points. We currently only have 1. Well, we need to add in another point. So how do we find another point? Well, we're going to use x equals 1 to find the point 1, blank. So we do not have enough points, which we currently do not. We have to have 2 different points. So if we only have 1 point, we need another point. So if we don't have enough, we use x equals 1. And we want to find that point 1, blank. So let's try to do that. Okay, this is your x value here. So we're going to use x equals 1. So y equals a minus 3x. We're going to use x equals that 1. You can use any number. I just choose 1 because it's easy to work with. And that leaves you then with y equals now negative 3. Now we have enough, because now we have 2 different points. Okay, we have the 00, and we have this extra point. So if you get the 00, only time you're going to have to do this is if you get the 00. If you get the 00, you need another point. So just make x equals 1 and complete the ordered pair. That's going to give you everything that you need to know. So now we have two different points to work with. And our first point goes through the origin at 0, 0. So there's that one. The next one is at 1, negative 3. That's our second point. Remember, we have to have at least 2 points so that we can connect them together. So when we put in that 1, that gave us an extra point, and we can now connect them together. So that one was missing the second point because they were double 0. And if they're double 0, what do? If they're double 0, we need 2 different points. So what we do is we plug in x equals 1, and we find another point. So once we've got that second point, then we can connect them together. Now let's look at one of these where we're just going to graph it, because we really can't make our table. We're going to try to find the intercepts and graph here. About y minus 4 equals 0. And what do we notice first about this one? Well, normally we have 2 variables, right? We normally have both an x and a y. Well, in this case, we only have a y value. So we only have a y. So what we're going to have to do is then solve it for y. So if you only have one variable, you've got to solve it for that variable. So we're going to go ahead now and we're going to solve this for y. So we're going to add our 4. And now we've got y equals 4. Now, why is this one different? Well, this one's different because, remember, we only have one variable. And if we go back and look before break, when we talked about the different outcomes that you might get, we talked about this one. Remember, that's on the next page here, this one. And if we go back a couple of pages, we had this. And for this one, when it was a y only, it was a horizontal line. So this one was y equals 2, and it looked like that. Ours, what does ours look like here? Well, ours looks a little bit different. We've got the same type of question here. Ours is y equals 4. So let's graph this line, and then we'll find our intercepts. We're only going to have one of the intercepts. So if I was going to graph this line, we've got y equals 4. We only have one variable. So that means since we only have a y, this must be a horizontal line. So only y must be horizontal. Okay, so if it's only got a y value, it must be horizontal. How do we graph it? Well, we've got y equals 4. What does that mean? That means it crosses the y-axis at 4. We know because we only have a y value, we know then it's going to be a horizontal line. It's going to look like this. be a horizontal line like that. So there's our graph. Now, what about our intercepts? Do we have an x-intercept? No. Why do we not have an x-intercept? Why is there none? This is our x-axis. Does this line ever cross our green x-axis? No. So in this case, there's no x-intercept. There, however, is a y-intercept. And our y-intercept is right here. And that's going to be written as an ordered pair. Has to be an ordered pair. You just can't write 4. That doesn't work. You have to write down the ordered pair. So my y-intercept as an ordered pair would be 0, 4. Because that's where it crosses the y-axis. Because remember, this is your x-axis, this one's the y-axis, and it crosses that y-axis at 4, and we label it as an ordered pair. Very important that you label it as an ordered pair, and it's going to be as an ordered pair 0, 4. Now that was when we had a y line. What's going to happen with the next line? Well, it's going to be done in a similar manner. So let's do one of those. We're going to graph the line by finding the intercepts. So how would I graph this line? X equals negative 5. Well, if this is x equals negative 5, what's it going to be? We only have an x part, right? And if we only have an x part, it's not diagonal anymore, it's a vertical line. So this is going to be a vertical line. We only have the x value, or the x part. So this is going to be a vertical line. And we'll graph it, and then we'll find our intercepts again. This is our x-axis. And so we want x equals a negative 5. So that's going to have to be back 5 units. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units back. We know it has to be a vertical line because all we have is the x part. So x only lines are vertical, y only lines are horizontal. And if you have both an x and a y, it's always going to be some kind of diagonal. This is going to be our vertical line here. And when we look at this, what do we know? When we look at it, do we have an x-intercept? Yes, we do. It's not just negative 5. What would it be as an ordered pair? As an ordered pair, it would be 0, negative 5. Because there is your x-intercept. Has to be an ordered pair, not just a number. What about our y-intercept? Do we have one? I think someone said no. Why not? Why is there none? Because does this graph right here, this line, does it ever cross my vertical green line here? Nope, never crosses it. So we have no y-intercept or none. That should now allow you to finish up 3.2. So all 3.2 is going to have you do is graph more of these lines, find the intercepts, or in some cases just find the intercepts. now we're going to move on and we're going to look at 3.3. 3.3 is the slope. So we're going to look at the definition of a slope now. Again, I think you'll find these sections to be much, much easier than Chapter 2. There's no real applications in this chapter at all. It's just graphing lines. And most students find it to be a much easier chapter than the second. So in 3.3, we're going to talk about slope. And when we talk about slope, we need to come up with a definition of our slope. And slope is just a ratio of the rise over the run. So slope is a ratio of the rise over the run. Slope can also be called pitch or grade. For example, if you're building a roof, you might not say what's the slope of that roof. You might say what's the pitch of that roof. If you're on a road crew and you're building a road, you're not going to probably say the slope of the road. You're probably going to say what's the grade of the road. So pitch, slope, and grade can all be used interchangeably. And what they are is a ratio of rise over run. So the slope now is the rise over the run. And when we talk about the rise, that's going to be the y part. And when we talk about the run, well, that's the x part. So the slope is the rise over the run. Rise is the up and down part. That's the y component. The run is the left and right part. That's your x component. It's also called m. So slope is called m in many cases. So slope is going to be referred to as m in many cases. So I may not write the word slope. I may just use an m. Okay? And m means the slope. There are 4 different types of slopes. So we're going to look at all 4 of them here. I'm going to draw pictures of all of them, and we're going to talk about what the slope is. Whether it's positive, whether it's negative, 0, or whether it's undefined. Okay, so I'm going to put some lines in here. We'll talk about the 4 different types of slopes that you may encounter. Okay, so these are our 4 slopes that we're going to be looking at here. Now the first 2. Okay, what's happening with these? Well, the way I remember these is I think of it like a roller coaster. And I always work from left to right. So if I'm on this roller coaster and I look at this line here, working from left to right, or you can think about it as reading a graph of the stock market, or any type of graph you might see. What's happening as I look at this from left to right? We read graphs from left to right, just like we read text. So reading it from left to right, what's happening here? It's going up. Okay? And if it goes up from left to right, then your slope m is going to be positive. So if it goes up from left to right, it's got a positive slope. This one is going down from left to right. And if this one goes down from left to right, then it has a negative slope. So when we look at a diagonal line, if it goes up from left to right, it's positive. If it goes down from left to right, it's negative. Vertical line. Now, a vertical line has an undefined slope. And here's the way I remember it. If I'm on a roller coaster again, I can't have that roller coaster go straight down. It always has to have a little bit of a curve, right? Because if I have this, what's going to happen? The roller coaster go too fast, right? Somebody might get hurt. You can't do this. You can't just go straight down because the car can't stay on the tracks. It's undefined. Undefined means not possible. So vertical lines, if you think about a roller coaster, you can't ever just have a straight drop down. Right? The car can't stay on the tracks if it was going to go straight down. It always has to have at least a little bit of a curve down. Might have a real curve down, but at least have to have at least a little bit of a curve down. It can't be just a straight drop off. So a vertical line is undefined. And a horizontal line a horizontal line has a slope of 0. And that just is again going back to that analogy of the roller coaster when you come back to the station. When you come back to the station and you pull into the station, you're not going up or down any. Right? You're flat, you're level. That's why it has a slope of 0. So if it's going up from left to right, it's positive. Down from left to right, it's negative. If it's a vertical line, it's undefined. If it's a horizontal line, it has a slope of 0. Now we're going to be actually finding the slope. So I'm going to give you a graph, and we're going to have to go through the process of finding our slope. So you're going to be given a graph, and you're going to find the slope. Here. Okay, we're going to be finding the slope here. Give us an easy one to work with. This is going to be our line here. We're going to use this picture now to find our slope. Well, when we look at our picture, let's first talk about what it is. Do you think my slope is going to be positive, negative, 0, or undefined? Well, when I look at my picture, what is it doing? I'm going to read it from left to right, and if I look at this picture from left to right, what is it doing? It's going up. Okay? So we automatically know then that this is going to have a what? This is going to have a positive slope. Now we need to figure out how to get from one point to the other. So I want to get from one point to the other. It doesn't matter which one we start at. So we're going to start at one point and we're going to end at the other one. So if I want to start here, how do I get to this point? Now we can't just follow the line. We can only go left to right, up and down. So if I'm here and I want to get to here, well, what can I do? I've got to go 4 units over, right? So 4 units over. And then what do I have to do after that? 5 units up. Now, what's your formula for the slope? Your slope is m, and that is rise over run. So, how many units did I have to go up? 5. How many units did I have to go down? Or, sorry, not go down. How many units did I have to go over? 4. So, your slope would be 5/4. Because you went up 5, and you went over 4. That makes sense because that's a positive slope, and it should be because we talked about this line going up from left to right. And that makes it positive, and we found our slope. Let's do another one of these. And then we'll talk about how to use ordered pairs. So one more like this. And then we'll use ordered pairs. This one's going to be at, and I'll go ahead and label this one. This one's going to be at 3, -5. I'm going to go ahead and connect, bless you. I'm going to go ahead and connect these together. And we're going to try to find our slope here. And we've got an original point up here at 0, 0. Now, I want to go from one point to the other. So let's say I start here, and I want to end up down here. So if I start here at the 0, 0, how do I get to this point? What do I have to do? I have to go down. How many units? Looks like I have to go down 5. And then I have to go over 3. So down 5 and over 3. Now my slope should be negative. Why should it be negative? Well, look at it as a picture. Left to right, it's going down. My slope better be negative. When we go down, it's negative. So my rise is a -5, then we went over 3. So that line would have then a slope of -5 over 3. That's going to be your slope there, rise over run. And all I did was I just drew a triangle and then counted the number of units I went over. Now we're going to learn how to use a formula to find the slope when we're given 2 points. So let's find the slope given 2 points. What we do is we use this formula. We use this formula, m equals y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So that is going to be our formula. So if you're given 2 points, And you can use this formula to find the slope. So let's go ahead now and find the slope. And let's say you're given 4, -3, and 8, 1. And I want you to find the slope. Well, if we want to use this formula, we've got to have 2 points, which we currently have. And we need to label these points. x1, y1, x2, y2. So always label your points. x1 for the first one, y1, x2, y2. I always like to rewrite the formula every time so I have it, so I can see it, and so I get used to using it and end up memorizing it at the end. It just makes it easier if you write it several times. You don't have to memorize formulas for your exam, but it does make it a lot easier. If you write it down a lot of times, you'll get it memorized pretty quickly. So your m is going to be then y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. Now we fill it in. We've got to be very careful if we have any double negatives. In this case, we don't. We're going to fill everything in. So we have y1, which is a -3, minus y2, which is 1. The y's go on the top. X's go down below. A lot of times I see students mix them up. Y's on top, x is down below. What about the x part? x1 is 4 minus x2, which is 8. Now we do need to clean up the fraction at the end. So always make sure that if you get a fraction that you can reduce it down. We've got -3 minus 1, that's a -4. And 4 minus 8, that's a -4 down below. Negative and negative makes it then a +1. So your slope now would simply be 1. Let's do 2 more of these, and then we'll take a short break. Let's try to find the slope again. I'm going to give you 2 ordered pairs. How about -5, -1, and 8, -2. So we now need to find our slope. So first thing we do, we recognize that we have 2 points, and we're going to use these 2 points together to find our slope. So label first x1, y1, x2, y2. What are we finding? Well, we are finding our slope. So let's write up our formula for the slope here. And that's m equals y1 minus y2 over x1 minus x2. So that's what we've got. We now take our ordered pairs and we plug them in. So that's going to be, now watch out for double negatives because this one does have them. We have -1, right, because that's y1 minus a -2. Right, see the double negative there? We'll deal with that in a moment. Down below we have -5, -8. Well, what do we know about a double negative here? Well, this double negative here is going to make that positive. So now we have -1 plus 2. And minus 1 plus 2, that makes it a 1. Down below, we have a minus 5. Minus 8, that makes it minus 13. You'll always want to bring that negative up to the top. And so what's your slope? Minus 1 over 13. And that's just a matter of using the formula here. Okay, I want to do one more. We'll take a break, and we'll come back, and we'll look at how to do it with the fraction. And then we'll move on to talk about line equations. So let's do one more. And I want you to find the slope here. Label x1, y1, x2, y2. Now I picked this one out to illustrate a specific point here. While we're copying this down, let's talk about division by 0. If the 0's in the numerator of a fraction, the top half, then it's just 0, right? 0 divided by any number is 0. What happens, though, if the 0 is down below? Well, if the 0 is down below, you can't divide a number by 0, so we call that undefined. So when we plug our values in, if we get a 0 down below, and we have a number divided by 0, that is not 0, that is called undefined. So let's plug our values in, see what we got, and talk about the result. Again, be very careful when you plug your values in. Remember, that's just y. Sorry about that. Looks like a negative there, but it's just y1. So we've got y1, which is a negative 12, minus y2, which is 9. Divide that by x1, which is 8, minus x2, which is also 8. Minus 12 minus 9, that makes it a minus 21. 8 minus 8 leaves you with a 0. And any number divided by 0 is undefined. So that's going to be undefined. Division by 0 is undefined. We're now going to go ahead and take a short break again, and we'll come back, and we should be able to finish up this section. So let's meet back at how about 10:40. That'll give you about a 15-minute break. So let's meet back here at 10:40. Then we'll come back and we'll finish up this section.